Welcome to a new episode of Outside the Panels with your host, Johnny the Machine Hughes.
Welcome everyone to another episode of Outside the Panels. And following on from our previous show where we had not one, but two, but three guests, we've only gone and done it again. This time around, we're talking with Chris Walker, Regine Sawyer, and finally Dr. Shamika Mitchell about their new book, Queen Amani Renas. I've probably said it wrong. It's my superpower. Sorry. Queen of Nubia. Guys, so much. Thank you so much for spending some time. I really do appreciate it. How are you all?
I'm well, thanks. Thank you for having us.
You're more than welcome. You're more than welcome. Excellent. So, let's start at the top. Let's start and work our way down. Why comic books? Why does this story work so well as a comic book? Who would like Chris? You can start us off on that as being the writer or a writer.
Sure.
Director, sorry.
I would say one of the creators. I give much respect to Regine for pulling this in and making it what it is.
Cool.
I worked with Christian Jones and Liz Jones, the founders of Lymari, and so when we started, Lymari is really focused on African history and bringing it to life and getting people excited about it.
Okay.
And initially we were talking about children's books, but as we started to explore it more and think about where that impact could be and how to get people excited about it, it really started to be comics, right? And when we think about comics and we think about, who's excited about comics and thinking about that kind of young reader, we thought comics was a great way, and comics has a beautiful way of talking to younger and older at the same time. So it really seemed like comics was the ideal medium to tell this story.
Cool. So, Regine, jump in. So, Chris, creative director, Christian Jones, the I suppose the kernel of the thing, generates the idea. Yeah. So how does that feel for you as a writer coming in when you've got like kind of a guide, perhaps, a kind of where you want to go? How much sort of do you get to then shape the message that you want to tell?
Well, since Amani Renas is a historical figure, I mean, it's easy to find information about her, even though there's not as much as we'd like. But there's enough to take that story and to add things to it if necessary. But her history is rich, and I didn't want to fool around with that too much. I think it was just very important to just to discuss and talk about who she was, why she's important to history, as well as to me as a Black woman. She's very important in terms of just how she lived and what she brought to her community, what she brought to society. And I wanted to articulate that. So my main thing was to push the history forward. That was right.
So then, Dr. Mitchell, this is pretty much where you come in then, right? Because you're lead researcher, research consultant. Is this your kind of neck of the woods then where you say, well, hold on a second, we need to make sure we get this.
Yes, that was a very ambitious effort. And I started the project research back in November. And it was a very strong push to the release date. Fortunately, because I am a very active researcher, I was able to hone in on some very reliable institutional resources to provide some of the factual material and the artifacts that were going to be helpful for us pulling the project together.
Cool. So,
and I'm going to jump in. She's being shy. Like she found, and Regine telling me, she found all kinds of stuff creatively where you were like, whoa, like this is what we can do. So, all props to Shamika and what she did.
Over 1,000 hours of research. So yeah, I would say I really, and I teach a full course load at State University in New York, Rockland. So it was during my winter break, which I was supposed to be on vacation, relaxing, and I spent it in the archives, but it was all worth it.
Cool. Excellent. So from you three then, do you kind of, when you were creating the book, is it kind of like a writer's room type of event where you three get together, thrash out the ideas you want to talk about, which elements of the history do you want to bring in, that sort of thing? Or do you just kind of go with the flow and then just touch base every now and again? Regine, you can, or Chris, yeah?
I'll just jump in on this one, just because the way it started, there are kind of a couple of different kind of moving pieces and trains that had already kind of left the building. So always give Regine her props for dealing with, a kitchen with multiple chefs. And I joke because, Regine, can I talk about that you, she's from the world of food. So I'm always, when I talk about food, I'm like, I don't know what I'm talking about, Regine, but from my limited experience of cooking with other people. But
hey, I eat food, so that makes me an expert, right? Yeah, it's gotta be right?
Exactly. So, I respect the fact that she was able to deal with so many different people. I think there are different iterations of it, right? So there are some things that have been created before we started working on it. Shamiki, got involved, and she was like, hey guys, this is great, but this is what really happened. So then we made some changes. And then Regine came in and she's like, hey, this is what actually was going on. And then between the two of them, they're like, hey, Chris, there's this actual timeline that's there. And I'm like, and they're like, no, that's actually what's going on. And then as I started reading stuff, I was like, yeah, you guys are right. That's like actually. So Regine, so there was a lot of things that happened, but we did kind of hit that groove, and going into, volumes 2 and 3, we're definitely excited to have a little bit more of that writer's room that you're talking about from the jump. And really, I think this time around, let Regine kind of like, I don't want to speak for her, but just kind of, have the ability to take it and run with a little bit more of that kind of information gathering up front. So she has the ability to really do her thing as a writer.
Cool. So Regine, are you wary when you tackle such a historical character that means so much to you and a whole host of people? Are you worried about artistic license getting in the way of the facts? Or are you more facts first, artistic license second?
I'm a mixture of both.
Well, good answer.
I felt like it's very important to remember that this is a historical figure, as I mentioned before, and that there are certain things that were true to her life. And there's also things that for me, I could surmise just by seeing what the times were, what the culture was in terms of Nubia, in terms of Rome and Egypt. You're talking about several different cultures, and they all have different ways of doing things. And that's historical fact. So with the cultures being historical fact, it was very important for me to push that home, especially for Nubia, which is a place that, again, historically, a lot of folks don't know much about. We're still learning more and more about that region and the different things that were going on during that time. So if whatever artistic license that I did take, it was always within the context of the culture. Is this culturally relevant? Is this historically relevant? So I wasn't going to just add things for giggles. Yeah. It was, like, I just have to have blah, blah. No, it not that so much. Only if it was in terms of what was going on culturally and historically. It's nice when things make sense.
Cool, excellent. So, Dr. Mitchell, do you then get to kind of run the rule over that, just to sort of like give it a second glance? Because I don't know about anybody else, when you create stuff, when I create things, I get quite tunnel visioned about it, and sometimes I don't always see the wood for the trees. So sometimes a second pair of eyes just to sort of like double check and say, well, hold on a second, or build up on this part. Is that kind of how that works for you guys?
For me, absolutely. I think one of the biggest challenges was picking out even costume designs. What were they wearing? historically. And luckily there are some archival resources about like the history of textile and textile fashions, shoe choices, things like that. And then the creative license, and like, for example, there's no historical evidence that any of the specialists I talked to from the museum, they don't know where ancient Egyptians put their babies, like in terms of a crib or a bassinet. So I said, well, we're going to get creative and come up with the kind of, crib that's going to work for babies, because there are lots of babies being born. But for ancient Rome, ancient Greece, there's no record of where did they put their babies? But we know they put them somewhere. So then you get to have some fun. I get to, go through Pottery Barn catalogs and all the other catalogs and find something that I think is going to make sense for, ancient Greece or ancient Nubia. And also looking at like what materials were common that might have been used to make some of the things like chairs. So that's where I think we had a lot of fun designing interior spaces and designing a lot of the costumes. So in that way, the project is very beautiful. We even wove in a lot of the actual artifacts from museums in there. So I had to go through and make sure that the artistic rendering was as close to the real relic as possible. So that was fun, and that was also very time consuming, but it was worth it.
All right. Okay. Now you've said fabric and the look of the book and so on. So I think it's only fair. That we take a quick peek. What do you think? There we go. How's that look?
There she is.
Yeah, there we go. This is the hero or heroine of the piece. You see the tapestry there across the shoulder piece. It looks really a lot of effort. You can see straight away from the art. A lot of effort's been put in to make that as accurate as possible. So kudos to the nods to the fabrics of the time.
Yeah,
that's Ryan Aragawa is amazing.
Yeah, he's a terrific artist. He's a Wildstorm alum, so he got to start on Savant Guard and did a bunch of stuff there.
Okay, cool, excellent. Pyramids in the back.
And those are Nubian pyramids. Yes, the Nubian pyramids are, some of them are just as tall. They're narrower, and they're mostly used as cemetery, funerary. So, Nubia, most people don't know, but Sudan, which is currently, that is what is ancient Nubia's now ancestor, right? So the ancestors, progenies, descendants, the Sudanese government has done a lot of work to preserve. But if you were to go to Sudan, they have more pyramids than Egypt. I think around a little over 200 pyramids of varying size and state of decay or preservation. But yeah, Sudan's tourism, you can go and visit some areas that are still open, but they do have a good amount that have also been closed to preserve and protect the integrity of the landscape.
So I've got to ask, because I mean, when we talk about pyramids, the whole conspiracy thing comes up, like who created the pyramids, right? So do you guys have an idea who created the pyramids?
Oh, these were people. People did this.
I tell you what, the prize for shooting me down goes to Dr. Mitchell. Hey, well done. Yeah, fantastic.
Hey, she does not play. I'll go ahead and tell you that. She does not play.
It was cool to think when they thought about aliens and stuff, but no, it was people. It was skilled craftspeople, particularly folks that were keen on bricklaying, keen on mud making, engineering. Yeah. So for Egypt and for Sudan, these were some very talented people. And their lines, I mean, I would need a protractor, a ruler, a leveler. I would need all this stuff. I don't know how they did this. in 1000 BC or 50 BC, but they built these places, and luckily some of them are still fairly intact. But yeah, it would definitely take a lot to do that now.
Fine. I've seen Battlestar Galactica. I know it was the Lords of Cobalt. Fine.
That's going to be the Alterverse version of Regine. She's going to be on a spaceship going to visit other galaxies. Regine can handle that.
Yeah, go on, Regine. Yeah, take it to the stars. All right, so it seems only fair that we have another quick look at another page. Which one shall we go with? I think I've got one ready primed. Let's have a quick look at this one. Window. There we go. There be some fighting going on here, I believe. There, that's it. So there you go. There's an example of culture of the time. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Yay! I got
that
one right.
is correct.
Yeah.
Two wonderful trivia questions for folks about ancient Nubia is they were known as excellent archers, and they also are known as excellent wrestlers.
Cool. So Regina, you want to say something there? Get in there, or are you just agreeing?
I'm agreeing. I mean, I'm a huge wrestling fan. For folks who know me well, Dr. Mitchell knows. I'm a huge wrestling fan. So it was a treat. It was a treat putting this scene in. It's like, oh, okay. Like, they're wrestlers. Okay, this is great.
When you say wrestling, do you mean wrestling or do you mean WWE?
I mean AEW. I mean WWE. I mean, listen.
I don't see
really whatever. I mean, I really enjoy the sport.
I don't see no tombstone pile drivers there. I'm sure.
No, you don't. If they had that, man, that'd be right there in the book.
No sharpshooters. Yeah. So I am really so much. Yeah.
The sharpshooting was the arrow proficiency. The one theory was the name Nubia. It was called the land of the bow. Because they were known, their archery was so excellent. The rumor was that they could shoot someone in the eye from 100 meters off. They were that keen. So they were sharpshooters of a different kind. But still, in terms of archery as sport, to show that in the same scene, right? Because this is all just exercise routine. This is not a combat exercise. This is just them training. But it was good to be able to highlight some of those historical facts. And they still do have wrestling tournaments in Sudan among some of the tribes that descended from the ancient Nubians.
Cool, excellent.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got to ask, who's the Chicago Bear fan? Because Christian Jones, ex-linebacker from the Chicago Bears, right? So somebody on this pod must be a Chicago Bears fan. Surely.
I'm the Chicago link, so definitely a Bears fan growing up with the fridge and refrigerator pair.
Mm-hmm.
I better not say who I support then. I better not.
Yeah, I think it's hard not to be a fan from those days. And I lived in Chicago. Part of the way the project came together is my next door neighbor in Chicago knew Christian and Liz, and we had created a children's book together. And so they were out at some venue, and someone mentioned that Christian and Liz, again, we're thinking about doing a children's book initially. Mm-hmm. And so that's where the introduction came in. So shout out to Chi-Town, the Bears. Actually, we did a project with the Chicago Bulls a while ago. So Chicago's a very friendly town when it comes to creative projects and comic books. Shout out C2E2 as well.
Oh yeah, C2E2.
Is that like a droid from Star Wars? Have I missed something?
Oh, C2E2 it stands for Chicago Comics Entertainment Expo. So it's 2 E's and 2 E's, so they call it C2E2. But it's essentially like their comic convention.
Okay.
Yeah,
it's the same. Yeah, it's the same company that puts on New York Comic Con.
All right. Cool.
And Emerald City Comic Con. So they get a good amount of attendance from folks in the Midwest who don't want to fly east or fly west. So you get to find a lot of local artists as well as some of the stuff that's coming out from the region. So it's always a good time. I've been there twice, and it usually happened in the wintertime, and with COVID, they changed their schedule. So I think it's happening in August now.
All right, cool. Excellent.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, before we take a quick break for one of our adverts, I will drop the bomb that I'm a Dolphins fan. So yeah, that's Dolphins 85. I remember the year. Do you remember? I'm not quite
Dan
sure.
Marino? Was that Dan Marino?
That was Dan Marino.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Sorry, spoiling your unbeaten party. Not that I'm going to. Don't hate me for that or anything, but no fins. All right, here's an advert for our other shows whilst we get ready for some more questions. You know what? Should we have a fun one? Check this one out. Crisis in the Toyverse, Bobo's own little pod, figures from across every universe, whether that be Ghostbusters, Marvel, DC, and everything in between. There you go. Excellent.
That was really cool.
You're like, ooh, yeah. You never know, you might get a Nubia figure.
I know. That would be really fun.
Yeah, cool. Excellent. Right. So the idea behind the book is to show diversity, to bring African culture to the forefront. Do you feel that with the reintroduction of things like Milestone Comics, you've got a new Batman who is Lucius's Fox son. You've got Static, who's been around for ages. You have a Nubia from DC in a Wonder Woman book, as well as a Brazilian Wonder Girl / Wonder Woman. Do you feel that diversity is making its sort of presence felt in mainstream comics and media? And this goes out. Everyone can get a say on this. Regina, you've been quiet a while, so you can jump in on this one first.
Well, I think most of those characters have been around for a very long time.
Okay.
I mean, you mentioned Nubia. Nubia was introduced in the 70s. So there's that diversity and inclusion isn't new. I think the thing is that instead of having all these characters that were in the background, Milestone aside, because I'll get to Milestone, but having all these various different characters who were never quite at the forefront, what folks are doing now is they're going into their catalogs of all their various different DC characters, all their various different Marvel characters, and they're bringing them to the forefront. Like I said, they're going through the encyclopedias and saying, well, we have a varied fan base. And I don't think people realize how varied it was, because comics has been something that's been in a lot of folks' lives. Like I was collecting comics at about 8 years old.
Cool.
And
what were you buying? I'm interested. What were you buying?
Well, initially, my father and I would go to the grocery store. We go to the local corner store. We call bodegas, and we would, and that's when they were still selling like magazines and whatnot. And he would buy Archie for me initially. So we'd buy Archie, buy Jughead, Betty and Veronica. I would get the digest size. Sometimes I would get the floppies, but mostly I would get the digest. And I would go to the library. I would grab Peanuts when they were in like digest form. There was also a really cool cartoon, and I haven't seen it in a long time. It's called Luann. And I love
Luann. I love Luann. She's great. I love Luann. It's brilliant.
I love Luann.
Yeah.
I did. I would go to the library all the time and get stacks of those digest books, specifically from her, specifically from Peanuts. And then my brother introduced me to the Marvel characters. I'm an 80s baby. I had the first Nintendo and I had the first X-Men game. And that's how I was initially introduced to the X-Men. The first time seeing Mohawk Storm, and I started collecting X-Men Classic from there. I started collecting comic book cards. I wrote an article for Marvel about my comic book card collection. So this fan base has always been there, but now we're getting recognized.
Yeah.
You know, and so it's like, oh, well, these folks have always enjoyed our books. So doesn't it make sense to have characters in the books that look like them? That's just what makes sense. So again, like they had encyclopedias full of these different characters, and now they're bringing them to the forefront. Because even the character, I think his name is Batwing, that is Lucius Fox's.
So the new, right? The new Batman.
Batwing. Yeah, so he's been around for I think about 4 years or so.
Well,
roughly.
So the current African American Batman isn't the Batwing Lucius.
He's not Batwing. He's Batman. Right?
He's the older son of Lucius Fox, who came out in the 70s, and then disappeared. He's in one book for about 2 panels or something. Gets into trouble, calls Bruce Wayne the man, as they do in the 70s, and then disappears. Comes back, and he takes on board a Batman mantle rather than a Batwing
mantle.
So, not that I'm a geek and know this stuff, of course.
No, but you do know this stuff, and those things are important because when folks ask, well, where these characters come from, you can go back to that issue in the 1970s. Say, well, this person is been here. He's in the encyclopedia. So is he someone that we can use? Someone that can be accessed? So now it's just really great to see what folks are creating from these characters. There's the wealth of stories that are coming from this. I mean, Milestone now. Milestone had like a wealth of stories about these various different characters, and now they're expanding upon that with those stories. And then they just had the Milestone Initiative, so we have a host of new writers and artists that are coming into the fray to lend their voice. So it's very exciting time, because you get to see comics evolve in real time. And when I say evolve, meaning that you get all these various different stories and hear from all these different voices that folks have not heard from. And we get to see what they can do with them. Whether we think it's great, whether we think it's whether we think it's whatever, it is something that's really important. So I'm excited to see it, as you can see, because I can't stop talking now.
What have I started? Where's the mute button? All right, Chris, what about yourself? Milestone fan back in the day?
So I was a colorist at DC and Marvel for years, and I started like sending samples when I was like 16, 17 years old, and a lot of it was coloring Milestone characters. So I was a big Jean-Paul Leon fan. Rest in peace. Very, very talented artist. And so I met some different colors who showed me stuff. But Milestone was back in the day you would get the printouts. I would mat them on foam core, and then I would do watercolor. That was how you did it, or you did the markers, and then you would do the notes. But that's, and I think, for Static, and this isn't like comparing him to Spider-Man, but I think people have said like, Static is similar to Spider-Man in the sense that it's like that everyday character, that person that you could know, that character next door, that kind of plucky underdog that's gonna figure out a way and fight and so when you think about it, Regine, you're probably thinking the same thing as an archetype. That's a classic archetype of a character, and Milestone did a great job of interpreting that, and that's why I think he feels like Spider-Man, because it's that everyday, that underdog that you like, and you can see that in a lot of different places.
I mean, I'm not going to disagree at all in any shape, way, or form, because you're an expert. You were there at the time. I'm the view from the cheap seats. I'm the reader. What I will say is, I think you've hit an absolute spot on nerve there. But rather than think Spider-Man and people think Peter Parker, I think Spider-Man Miles Morales or Static a huge debt of gratitude, because without Static, nobody's thinking they're going to create Miles Morales.
Right. Yeah, and it's interesting. I like Peter's one of my favorite characters ever. I can get super nerdy. Like back in the day when they first introduced what was his name? Scarlet Spider. What's his name?
Ben Riley. Ben
Riley. I love that character because for once you saw Peter have a friend who understood what he was going through. And I think it's interesting how they bring him back and what they're doing with the Spider-Verse now. But I was always a Peter fan, right? Like I always could identify with him. And as far as diversity, like Regina's saying, these characters have been here. Here's how much of a nerd I am. Anybody was a Nightwatch fan from Marvel? Like the fake Spawn character that was like a techno Spawn? Remember Cardiac?
I remember Cardiac. I remember blue and white suit. Eric Larson helped create it.
Right. Right. So, I think the characters have been there. I think audiences have enjoyed them. I know there's like this kind of thing with the mantle and, should it be like a black Spider-Man or a white Spider-Man, that sort of thing. But I think when you appreciate the mantle, like Miles, it's interesting what you can do when you take the mantle of the hero and then apply it with like different cultural, insights, And I think they've done a really great job, especially in the movie. Like I'm in New York, whoever worked on it, like Miles is definitely a Afro-Latino kid, right? I love the role that his mom played in the movies, where it's like if you have a friend who, has like a Hispanic background, a black background, like they're there, like they're not separate things for that person. And I loved how they really brought that to life. And then my last note, whoever worked on it, they got the curl size right on his hair, not only for being Afro-Latino, but the animators actually took time to think about how that curl size moves. So I think as we see more of that stuff, and my hope is that other people enjoy it too. I think one of the great things about diversity is it's fun to learn about other cultures. It's fun to, see other people. And I hope that more and more kind of readers and audiences enjoy either these characters being explored from these different points of view or even new characters. I'm excited about new characters that come out that have their own history and their own backgrounds, but they bring whatever that cultural heritage is. And I think, to what Regine was saying, and thanks to Dr. Mitchell, I think we did a really good job of trying to understand what was the culture at the time in Nubia and doing that. And if you see the book, Regine, she'll tell you, I was like texting her as the images were coming to life. I was like, oh, wow, you did this. It's really cool. Or, oh, wow, you did that. Or, one of the characters, I don't want to spoil it. I'm like, she's a hugger. And I thought that was really cool how she brought those things in.
Cool. Excellent. And then Dr. Mitchell, finally round us off. Are you a comic book fan?
I am more of a manga comic book fan, cool. And then also comic strips in the US. That was really my thing. I mean, other than X-Men, most of the comics that I read when I was younger, it was like Garfield, the Peanuts, anything that came out on the Sunday paper, color edition.
I'm just asking, what about that U.S. Acres? What about that?
Yeah, like Calvin and Hobbes, Family Circus, Curtis, and then of course later with the Boondocks when it first debuted. I had a lot of fun with that. I think comic strips are a way to tell story differently. And so in the manga form, manga just means comics in Japanese, whether it was the 4-panel strip or whether it was an ongoing series, you get a chance to see another way to tell the story through different, lengths of the size. So if it's a, comic strip, you've got to get in and get out. But if it's a comics, a manga chapter, as opposed to a comic book, it's only going to be, maybe 15 pages, but it's every week. So, US comics being monthly, for comic books, it's a longer story being told over a periodic, period of time, as opposed to that daily or that weekly where you have to do a little bit more work. So, I enjoyed Dick Tracy just as much, even though it wasn't very funny. And there was a lot of mystery. I still enjoy, I enjoyed what they did, what they were doing and how it's evolved now.
Yeah.
With detective work in the 21st century, it's a little different compared to Crime Stoppers of 1980s. So, I mean, they've done some really cool things with it, but I look forward to, especially with something like Amani Rennes, like bringing that kind of entertainment and storytelling to something that actually is true.
Cool. Excellent.
Yeah.
All right.
I
Excellent.
want to give a quick shout out to Dr. Mitchell, like the power of the 3-panel comic strip. I'm glad that you talked about it. It's amazing to do that. And like you're saying, being a fan of that. I don't know if I ever told you, I actually was a comic strip artist before I got super into comics. I used to make comic strips. I ran the comic strip department at my college, at my
wow.
So we got some off-camera conversations to get into.
Oh, there you go. Who knew? Right.
Who
knew? Before we round it up, I think we'll take a quick another peep. There we go.
Hey, there she is.
There you go. What's with the thing on her eye? What's that going on there?
So one historical tidbit is that it was during this series of conflicts with the Roman Republic as it's evolving into an empire, she got into a kerfuffle with a Roman soldier, and she lost an eye as a result. And so, in addition to other things that happen, one of the things that occurred is she's injured in battle.
Huh?
And she rules for 30 years. I think she's the longest continuous sovereign in ancient Nubia of all the other. I mean, you have to go back maybe to the 25th dynasty before you can find somebody. But she's from the era known as the Candaces of Meroe. That really is the latter half of the 1st century, all the way through to 300 CE, where Nubia is ruled by queens and sovereign queens at that mostly. And so these were not women that inherited their power through marriage, but they were born into it. And she's the second queen sovereign of this later stage of the Nubian Empire.
Cool. Wow. Heavy stuff. Right. If you are interested in the book, you can follow the link down there. Dead simple. Go to Amazon.com, type in Queen Amani Rennes.
Yes. Amani Rennes. You got it.
There you go. Woohoo! And then it will bring up a whole host of items for you to look at. For more information, you can always check out Lymari Media. It's down there. Pause the video now so you can get the address. Just don't pause it when I'm pulling the face because I look ugly and I don't need your help to make me look ugly. Thanks very much. Cheers. All right. All that's left for me to do is to thank our guests, our wonderful guests, Chris, Regine, and Dr. Mitchell for spending the time to talk about this fantastic book, pushing the history of such a vibrant character, a vibrant world that people don't know about, So, you know what? Go to Amazon. Not right now. Let me do the spiel first, then go. Go to Amazon. Check out the book. You get entertained, you get educated, and you know what? The book looks just plain great. There you go.
Thank you.
You're more than welcome.
Thank you.
Guys.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you so much.
You're more than welcome. Don't forget to check out the UCPN for all your favorite shows, including Crisis in the Toyverse, of course, The Definitive Crusade, the No Prize Podcast, and if you like your old comics, which includes Mohawk Storm, don't forget to check out the Old Timers Comic Book Show, where the hosts aren't old, but the comics most certainly are. All right. Gentlemen and ladies, thank you very much. Appreciate your time. And I am your host, Johnny the Machine Hughes. Adios.
Take care.
Visit undercovercapes.com for the latest and greatest podcasts via the Undercover Capes Podcast Network. Also visit our parent company website, comiccrusaders.shop, all about comic pop culture.